Most men navigate relationships through guesswork. They react to behavior without understanding the patterns behind it. They get confused by contradictions. They take things personally that aren't personal at all. And they keep making the same mistakes because they never learn to see the structure underneath the surface. Today, we're going to change that. This isn't about judging anyone. It's about understanding clearly, practically, without the romantic illusions that keep men confused and the cynical bitterness that keeps them angry. What you're about to learn is a framework, a lens, a way of seeing behavioral patterns that will make sense of things that used to seem random or mysterious. Pay attention, take notes if you need to, because once you understand this, you can't unsee it. And fair warning, this isn't going to confirm what you want to hear. It's not going to tell you that women are angels or that they're devils. It's going to show you reality, complex, structured, and ultimately navigable if you're willing to do the work of understanding it. The first thing you need to understand is that personality isn't chaos, it's structure. People behave in patterns. Those patterns are random. They emerge from psychological configurations that form early in life and remain relatively stable over time. Think of it like an operating system. The hardware is biology, the software is personality. And just like computers, there are only so many operating systems out there. This means behavior is predictable once you learn to recognize the patterns. Not perfectly predictable, people aren't machines, but predictable enough to navigate relationships with far more clarity than most men ever achieve. The framework I'm going to share with you organizes these patterns into something you can actually use. It's not the only way to understand psychology, but it's practical. It maps onto real behavior you'll observe in real relationships. And it gives you a vocabulary for things you've probably noticed but couldn't articulate. Every person has what we might call a psychological core, a fundamental orientation that shapes how they relate to the world. This core doesn't change much over a lifetime. It's the baseline, the default setting. But here's what confuses people. The core expresses itself through different roles depending on context. The same person can seem completely different at work versus at home, with friends versus with strangers, in the early stages of dating versus years into a marriage. These aren't lies or deceptions, they're adaptations. Humans are social creatures, and we adjust our presentation based on environment. A woman might be nurturing with children, competitive with coworkers, playful with close friends, and reserved with strangers. Same core, different expressions. The mistake most men make is assuming that one of these expressions is the real person and the others are fake. That's not how it works. All of them are real. They're just different facets of the same underlying structure. Your job is to identify the core, understand which role you're seeing, and recognize when roles shift. That's the foundation of everything else. The core reveals itself most clearly under pressure. When someone is stressed, tired, scared, or caught off guard, that's when the core emerges most visibly. The roles we play require energy to maintain. When energy is low, the core shows through. Now let's talk about the major psychological orientations you'll encounter. These aren't rigid categories, most people are combinations, but understanding the pure forms helps you recognize the patterns when they appear mixed. The first orientation is attention-focused. Some people organize their psychology around being seen, noticed, validated. Their self-worth connects directly to external attention. They light up when they're the center of focus and dim when they're not. This isn't vanity in the moral sense, it's a psychological configuration. They genuinely feel more alive when attention flows toward them. The second orientation is status-focused. These people organize around hierarchy, achievement, and social position. They're aware of where they stand relative to others and motivated by climbing. Relationships serve partly as status markers. Who you're with reflects on who you are. The third orientation is connection-focused. These people organize around emotional bonds. They seek depth, intimacy, and feeling understood. They're less interested in being seen by many and more interested in being truly known by few. The fourth orientation is security-focused. These people organize around stability, safety, and predictability.
They prefer known quantities over exciting possibilities. They're willing to sacrifice excitement for peace. The fifth orientation is experience-focused. These people organize around sensation, novelty, and pleasure. They seek intensity and variety. Routine feels like death to them. They're drawn to whatever feels alive in the moment. The sixth orientation is control-focused. These people organize around order, influence, and authority. They feel secure when they're directing outcomes and anxious when things feel chaotic or out of their hands. Most people you meet will be combinations of these orientations with one or two dominant. Learning to identify the dominant orientation tells you a lot about what drives someone's behavior. Here's a practical tip. The dominant orientation usually reveals itself in what someone talks about when left to choose topics freely. What do they consistently bring up? What do they notice in the world? What makes them animated? The answers point to the orientation. Also, watch for what triggers strong reactions. An attention-focused person will react strongly to being ignored. A status-focused person will react strongly to being disrespected or outcompeted. A connection-focused person will react strongly to emotional distance. The triggers reveal the orientation. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear in social situations. It's not fake in the dishonest sense. It's more like an interface, the part of ourselves we present to navigate social reality. Everyone has a persona. You have one. I have one. It's necessary. You can't walk around with your entire psychological complexity visible at all times. Social interaction would become impossible. But here's what matters for understanding relationships. Different personas serve different functions. Some personas signal approachability, warmth, openness, harmlessness. These reduce threat and invite connection. You'll see these in social situations where someone wants to be liked. Some personas signal vulnerability, softness, need, uncertainty. These invite protection and caretaking. They can be genuine expressions of inner state or strategic presentations. Some personas signal confidence, self-assurance, sexuality, power. These establish value and attract attention. They communicate, "I'm worth pursuing." Some personas signal innocence, purity, naivete, freshness. These trigger protective instincts and convey low threat. Some personas signal unavailability, distance, mystery, preoccupation. These create chase dynamics by suggesting the person is difficult to attain. The key insight is that personas are tools. They're selected based on what someone is trying to accomplish in a given context. Recognizing which persona you're seeing helps you understand what that person is trying to achieve with you or in that moment. Here's what makes this tricky. A skilled person can switch personas fluidly, sometimes within a single conversation. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It can be social intelligence, but it means you can't assume the version you're seeing now is the version you'll see tomorrow. The question to ask yourself is, does this persona feel earned or performed? Genuine warmth looks different from performed warmth. Real confidence looks different from projected confidence. Over time, you develop instincts for the difference. If the persona is what we show, the shadow is what we hide. Jung's concept of the shadow refers to the parts of ourselves we've rejected, traits, desires, fears, and impulses that conflict with our self-image or social acceptability. We push them down. We pretend they don't exist. We deny them even to ourselves. But they don't disappear. They operate underground, influencing behavior in ways the person often doesn't recognize. Here's why this matters. The shadow tends to leak out. Suppressed traits emerge in moments of stress, intoxication, or emotional intensity. The persona cracks and something else shows through. A woman who presents as endlessly sweet and accommodating might have a shadow filled with resentment and anger. A woman who presents as tough and independent might have a shadow filled with vulnerability and fear of abandonment. A woman who presents as sexually confident might have a shadow filled with shame and insecurity. The shadow isn't evil, it's just hidden. An understanding that everyone has one, everyone has parts of themselves they don't want to acknowledge, helps you see people more completely. When you're evaluating someone for a relationship, pay attention to what they seem to be hiding from themselves. That shadow material will eventually surface. Better to understand it early than to be blindsided later. You can often detect shadow material by noticing what someone strongly denies about themselves. I'm not a jealous person, from someone who monitors your social media. I don't care about money, from someone who constantly brings up finances. I'm totally over my ex, from someone who mentions them in every conversation. The emphatic denial often points directly at the shadow. Different psychological orientations tend to suppress different things. Understanding these patterns helps you predict what shadow material might emerge. Attention-focused personalities often suppress fears of being ordinary or forgettable. Their shadow contains terror of invisibility, of being just another face in the crowd. This can emerge as desperate bids for attention when they feel overlooked. Status-focused personalities often suppress feelings of inadequacy and fear of failure. Their shadow contains the belief that they're secretly not good enough. This can emerge as intense defensiveness when their position feels threatened. Connection-focused personalities often suppress fears of abandonment and rejection.
Their shadow contains the terror of being left, of not being enough to keep someone's love. This can emerge as clinginess or preemptive withdrawal. Security-focused personalities often suppress desires for excitement and freedom. Their shadow contains impulses toward risk and novelty that conflict with their need for stability. This can emerge as sudden, surprising breaks from routine. Experience-focused personalities often suppress needs for stability and depth. Their shadow contains longing for genuine connection that conflicts with their restless seeking. This can emerge as unexpected crashes into emptiness or desperation. Control-focused personalities often suppress vulnerability and the need to be taken care of. Their shadow contains desires to surrender control, to be protected rather than always protecting. This can emerge as breakdowns when their control systems fail. If you want to understand behavior at the deepest level, look for the fear. Much of what people do, especially in relationships, is driven by fear they may not even consciously recognize. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being used, fear of missing out, fear of aging, fear of being trapped, fear of being alone. These fears operate in the background, shaping decisions that seem to be about something else entirely. A woman who insists on constant communication might frame it as wanting closeness, but the engine underneath might be fear of abandonment. A woman who keeps her options open might frame it as independence, but the engine underneath might be fear of commitment and loss of control. When you can identify the core fear, behavior stops being confusing. It starts to make perfect sense as a strategy for managing that fear. This isn't about judging someone for having fears. Everyone has them. It's about seeing clearly what's actually driving behavior so you can respond to reality rather than the surface presentation. The deepest fears are usually formed early in childhood, in formative relationships, in experiences that left marks. These fears don't respond easily to logic or reassurance. They're installed at a level below conscious thought, and they run in the background like an operating system process you can't easily close. When you identify someone's core fear, you also identify what they'll sacrifice to avoid triggering that fear. Someone terrified of abandonment will sacrifice dignity to avoid it. Someone terrified of being controlled will sacrifice intimacy to avoid it. The fear predicts the sacrifice. Here's something that confuses a lot of men. The same woman can seem like completely different people at different times. This isn't necessarily deception, it's role switching, a normal psychological process where people shift between different modes of being based on context. You've probably experienced this yourself. The version of you at work is different from the version with close friends. The version during conflict is different from the version during intimacy. Same person, different modes. Role switching becomes problematic when it's extreme or when someone uses it to manipulate, presenting one version to secure commitment and then shifting to another version once commitment is locked in. How do you tell the difference between healthy adaptation and problematic shifting? Time and observation. Healthy role switching has coherence underneath. You can see how the different versions connect to a consistent core.
Problematic shifting feels disconnected, like different people inhabiting the same body. Pay attention to who someone is when they think no one important is watching. Pay attention to how they treat people who can't benefit them. Pay attention to what emerges under stress. These moments reveal the core more reliably than curated presentations. Psychological patterns don't stay static. They evolve, sometimes in predictable ways. Certain strategies that work well in youth stop working as well later. This creates pressure for adaptation. How someone handles that pressure reveals a lot about their psychological health. Healthy adaptation means updating strategies to match current reality, adjusting expectations, developing new sources of meaning and self-worth, growing into different strengths as old ones fade. Unhealthy adaptation means rigidly clinging to strategies that no longer work, denial of changing reality, increasing bitterness as expectations collide with outcomes, blaming external factors for internal failures to adapt. You can often predict how someone will age psychologically by observing how they handle smaller disappointments now. Do they adjust and move forward, or do they dig in, blame others, and refuse to accept reality? The capacity for honest self-assessment and adaptation is one of the most important traits to evaluate in a long-term partner. Looks fade, circumstances change. What remains is how someone responds to change. A woman who can acknowledge her own role in failures, adjust expectations to reality, and find new sources of meaning as old ones fade, that's someone who will age well psychologically. A woman who insists the problem is always external, who clings to expectations that life has already proven unrealistic, who responds to disappointment with blame rather than adaptation, that's someone who will become increasingly difficult over time. This isn't about whether someone is currently struggling. Everyone struggles. It's about how they struggle. Do they move through difficulty toward growth, or do they get stuck in resentment?
Understanding these patterns helps you predict what you're getting into. Some configurations prioritize extraction, getting as much as possible from a relationship while investing as little as necessary. This isn't always conscious or malicious. Sometimes it's just how someone learned to relate based on early experiences where resources were scarce and had to be captured. Some configurations prioritize exchange, fair trading of value, mutual benefit, clear reciprocity. These tend to create stable but sometimes transactional relationships. Some configurations prioritize merging, deep emotional fusion, shared identity, intensive bonding. These create intense connection but can also create dependency and loss of individual boundaries. Some configurations prioritize independence, maintaining autonomy even within partnership, resisting interdependence. These protect individual freedom but can limit intimacy. There's no objectively right configuration, but there are compatibility considerations. A merger matched with an independence prioritizer creates constant friction. An extractor matched with another extractor creates mutual exploitation. Understanding what configuration you're dealing with helps you assess compatibility. Some people relate primarily through control. Understanding this pattern helps you recognize it early. Control-oriented relating doesn't always look like obvious domination. It can be subtle, influencing decisions, managing information flow, creating dependency, positioning oneself as indispensable. At moderate levels, this pattern can actually create structure and stability in relationships. Someone has to make decisions. Having a partner who's comfortable taking charge isn't inherently problematic. At extreme levels, it becomes suffocating. The other person's autonomy gets eroded. Disagreement becomes unacceptable. The relationship becomes about one person's needs while the others are dismissed or managed. Watch for early signs. How does she respond when you make decisions she didn't anticipate? How does she handle not getting her way? Does she respect your autonomy, or does she treat it as an obstacle to manage? Control patterns usually intensify over time, not diminish. What you see early is the mild version. Some people carry accumulated resentment that colors all their relationships. This is important to recognize because it determines how you'll be treated regardless of your own behavior. Resentment usually has origins:
past betrayals, unprocessed trauma, expectations that life or relationships failed to meet. The original causes might be legitimate grievances, but when resentment calcifies into a permanent orientation, it stops being about the original causes. It becomes a lens through which everything is filtered. New people become stand-ins for old grievances. Innocent actions get interpreted through suspicious frames. You cannot fix someone else's resentment through good behavior. If they've decided the category you belong to is the enemy, your individual actions will be reinterpreted to confirm that belief. How do you spot it? Listen to how she talks about past relationships, about men in general, about people who disappointed her. Chronic resentment reveals itself in patterns of blame, in inability to acknowledge any personal contribution to failures, in consistent positioning as the victim of others' malice. Resentment is not your problem to solve, it's a warning sign to recognize. Let's be clear about something. Many of the difficult patterns we've discussed have roots in trauma, betrayal, abandonment, abuse, neglect. These experiences shape how people relate. Someone who learned early that trust leads to pain develops protective strategies. Those strategies make sense given their history, even when they create problems in present relationships. Understanding this matters for two reasons. First, it replaces judgment with comprehension. Difficult behaviors aren't evidence of bad character. They're often evidence of bad experiences. This doesn't mean you have to tolerate behaviors that harm you, but it helps you see the person more completely. Second, it helps you assess what you're getting into. Trauma doesn't excuse harmful behavior, and you're not obligated to be someone's healing journey. Understanding that certain patterns have deep roots tells you those patterns won't change easily, even with good intentions on both sides. Compassion and self-protection aren't opposites. You can understand why someone is the way they are and still decide the relationship isn't worth the cost. Everything I've shared is useless if you don't develop the discipline to actually observe. Most men don't observe, they project. They see what they want to see, what they hope for, what they fear. They fill in blanks with fantasies rather than data. They take early presentations at face value and ignore contradictory information. Real observation means watching patterns over time. It means noting inconsistencies rather than explaining them away. It means paying attention to actions rather than just words. It means seeing who someone is under different conditions: stress, disappointment, success, boredom. The best time to observe is when someone doesn't know they're being evaluated. How does she treat service workers? How does she respond when things don't go her way? What does she say about others when they're not around? What patterns emerge in her life story? Observation requires patience. You can't see someone's true patterns in a few weeks of dating when everyone's on their best behavior. You need time, varied situations, and the willingness to actually see what's in front of you rather than what you wish was there. This framework gives you tools for prediction, but let's be honest about the limits. People are complex. No framework captures everything. The same patterns can produce different outcomes depending on countless variables: life circumstances, other relationships, timing, growth, regression. Use this as a lens, not a crystal ball. It helps you see more clearly. It doesn't guarantee you'll see everything. The point isn't to become cynical or to assume you can predict every outcome. The point is to replace naive illusion with informed assessment, to stop being blindsided by things that were actually visible all along, to make relationship decisions based on observation rather than hope. Some men take this kind of knowledge and become bitter, distrustful, or manipulative themselves. That's a mistake. Understanding doesn't require becoming cold. Clarity doesn't require abandoning genuine connection. The goal is to see clearly and still engage warmly, to protect yourself without closing yourself off, to understand patterns while remaining open to being surprised. Let me summarize what this means practically. When you meet someone, start by identifying the dominant orientation. Is she primarily attention-focused, status-focused, connection-focused, security-focused, experience-focused, or control-focused? Watch for evidence over time. Observe the persona being presented.
What function is it serving? What is she trying to accomplish or communicate? Is the persona stable, or does it shift dramatically in different contexts? Infer the shadow. Based on what she presents, what might she be suppressing? What fears probably drive her? Where are the cracks likely to appear? Assess relationship patterns. Does she orient toward extraction, exchange, merging, or independence? Is there evidence of control patterns or accumulated resentment? What does her history suggest about how she'll behave with you? Take your time. Observe under varied conditions. Don't commit before you've seen enough to make an informed decision. Don't let attraction override evaluation. And remember, this framework applies to everyone, including you. The same psychological structures operate in both men and women. Understanding others starts with understanding yourself. What's your dominant orientation? What personas do you wear? What shadow material are you suppressing? What fears drive your decisions? These questions aren't just for evaluating others, they're for evaluating yourself. The man who knows himself is harder to manipulate. He recognizes when his buttons are being pushed because he knows where his buttons are. He sees through performances because he's aware of his own performances. He catches projection because he knows what he's likely to project. The female mind isn't mysterious. It isn't chaotic. It isn't fundamentally incomprehensible to men. It operates according to patterns that can be observed, understood, and navigated. What makes it seem mysterious is that most men never learn to see the structure. They react to surface presentations. They take words at face value. They project their hopes onto ambiguous signals. They get confused by role switching that would be predictable if they understood the underlying system. You now have a framework. Use it. Practice observation. Test your predictions against reality. Refine your understanding over time. Clarity is power, not power over others, power over your own choices. The power to see clearly, assess accurately, and decide wisely who deserves access to your time, your resources, and your life. That's not cynicism, that's maturity. And maturity is exactly what's missing from most men's approach to relationships. They operate from illusion, from hope, from what they want to be true rather than what is true. Then they're shocked when reality doesn't match their fantasy.